right, for the report. So, you know, there might be some things that I or Steve disagree with, or Katie, or don't quite understand. Sorry, Kirsty, Katie, sorry, Kirsty. We don't understand, or but that doesn't matter. There's no wrong. There's nothing can be wrong today. We've asked you to pitch in something. That's fine. However, for the report, that's why we're having this discussion now. We're going to make some suggestions, and again, it's down to you what you do and what you choose to do in your report. But we're going to make some suggestions to areas and things that we think you should think about, and that's up to you as to in the next week. So as always, I'll say some general things very briefly. Steve will say some general things, and then it'll come back to me, and I'll do some more specific issues for the report, and then Steve on specifics. Remember that the report's only is it 1,000 or is it 1,000? No. Thank you, Ms. Kirsty. 1,500 words is not a lot. You will find it's not a lot to play with of words, and that's intentional. It's a consultant's pitch, and you don't get a lot of time to present, particularly on the first pitch when you're probably tendering against other consultants. You've got to sort of be quick, sharp, to the point, and answerable. It's the same with the report. So you've got to be careful as to how you're putting the report together. And for that reason, you probably in this presentation, as most groups have, got too much already in what you said for the report, right? And I think what I would suggest you do is a lot of the stuff that you gave at the beginning, which was the background, the introduction, the stuff about the markets. We're Marks and Spencers, we know all that. So I think you can massively prune that. I'm not saying ignore it completely, but we've asked you to come in that context to help us and give us advice on what we should do. And it's what we should do, your recommendations, that I think the report should really focus on. And to do that, therefore, I think you need to bring forward, rather than the introduction and all the background of the industry and the check, you can bring forward what are the core issues here at stake, what you believe to be the core issues, the problems, the problematization that Marks and Spencers faces in the environment it is situated in. And by the way, don't underplay, it's a bit specific this, but don't underplay the fact that Marks and Spencers also have a strong food angle, and it still is. That's actually quite successful. And don't underplay that they have a home sort of aspect to them as well, home goods. Did tend to become a little bit clothing centric, the presentation. If that is going to be your focus, if you want to pitch it in as, well, we're here mostly to recommend on your clothing lines, fine, but make it explicit. Or alternatively, give some consideration to food that's successful. Maybe you've got some comments on how to be even more successful, and things like that. So bring forward what are the core issues, what are the core values, but also the other general point I'll make is remember in the report that you're addressing us, Marks and Spencers. So make it absolutely clear that you're addressing us. Don't talk to us about in the report about Marks and Spencers. It's also so address us. You know what I mean? So it's just a case of the language and how we pitch it in. You know, but again, just to stress, in the presentation per se, you're doing really well. So well done.
Thank you. Yeah, my two general points are pretty much the same as John's. Basically, make sure that in the report you embrace the role play, that you realise that we're Marks and Spencers, and address us, because that then flows through to the second point. I really liked at the front how you attempted to put the core issue at the front. This is the best strategy, and this is what you should do for the report. But if you start embracing the role play and you understand that we're Marks and Spencers, then it's our core issue that you need to be putting at the front, not the industry's core issue, because you started with the industry's core issue. And it wasn't until you got down to retail trends that you actually started really hitting on the problem that Marks and Spencers face. And in general, you only really mentioned it there once and in passing. The biggest problem is that, and I think you used the word old, you know, Marks and Spencers is stuck in the 1970s and it hasn't moved with the times. So what's the core issue? The core issue is that they've lost a unique selling point. How to regain it. And I mention that because when we come back and talk about specifics, that's probably what I'll be focusing on.
Okay, good. Is that all right so far? Right. I mean, there's nothing major there. I mean, it'll take a bit of work, but and we've given you ideas for starters on how you can prove what you've got here and get it right for the report. So, more specific items. Again, we're Marks and Spencers. Depersonalise what you're saying to us. So the stuff about Joe McDonald, I get it, right? And I'll probably get it as the chief exec of Marks and Spencers. But let's keep people out. Talk about issues. You know, if you want to bring that up still as part of your idea about you know, the lead time and things like that, and stocks and supply chains, then you can sort of say, you know, it's well known, or we're aware that there's been supply chain problems in Marks and Spencer, so we'd like to recommend it. But you don't have to sort of say inappropriate personnel and things like that. So just a matter of. The next bit I would say was actually really interesting. The stuff you said about the retail trends from the Deloitte 2020 report, and you put it across really nicely. But you know, that's a rival. Deloitte is one of our big rivals. So
Deloitte is one of their big rivals.
Sorry, thank you. Yes, correct. That's one of your rivals. That's what I meant. So, you know, you wouldn't be pitching in some of the consultants' evidence, but the evidence is all out there. So Deloitte are picking up from various other sources. So I think you'd be justifiable to put forward your paraphrased version of the Deloitte issue, if you know what I mean. Yeah. No problem. Let's not give Deloitte any more work than they already have. You know, somewhere in there, about a third into it, you started to talk about the purpose. It was just a line, a subtitle of purpose, and you talked then about the phrase. Was it you, Tal? Yeah. Talked about the purpose, and you said, you know, we maybe need to think about, and this is, I've got it in inverted commas, I've got it in speech marks. Think about what we stand for. That's it. That one line is it. That's where you begin. That's where the core issue is, the problem. You know, we've got all these challenges. The financial numbers are saying we're in the shit, right? We're getting bad press, we're getting bad everything. So we need to take stock. And one of the things, if not the main thing we need to take stock at with all those challenges is, what do we want to stand for going forward? And that's why then, so that helps hopefully to clear up to make even clearer what we were saying before about bring the problematization up front, the core issues at stake. So then you got into the recommendations, the majority of which, but tweaked in the way that we'll suggest, I think then makes up the bulk of your report, because that essentially that's what you're adding value to our understanding here by recommending things to us. But when you went into the recommendations, I believe that the first bit was about quick response manufacturing, right? Yeah. It wasn't clear to me that you were getting into the recommendations. So I think you need to make it very clear in your report that, okay, so we recommend these things. You would have done, but it wasn't clear then. And your recommendations are what they are. I don't necessarily personally, whether I'm John Burns or whether I'm CEO of Marks and Spencers, I don't buy all of them, but that's not an issue here. That's not a problem. The issue is, whatever you choose to recommend, make sure that as much as you can, you substantiate the arguments, and also give a thought, give a wider lens to some of the things that you're arguing. It is my suggestion, and let me put a little bit more beef to that comment. So when you talked about, for example, Talia, that you talked about quick response manufacturing. Yeah. Now, in several respects, I can see that there's been supply chain problems. You know, so you're addressing the problems that Marks and Spencers have had. You're consultants, and you're likely to have, you know, a pitch on improving things like supply chain. I mean, it's the way of the world. That's what consultants will do, amongst other things. So you talked about power of time, organizational structure, system dynamics, enterprise-wide applications. All okay stuff. Little bit conceptual stuff, that drawn maybe from the academic-y world. You can probably make it a little bit more pragmatic in the language about what you're trying to address. But, and it's okay to still go down that route of the lead time of the quick response manufacturing. However, you don't have to do this, but I would recommend that you tally that in with a little bit of thought of the externalities and the consequences of that kind of approach. The sustainability. You know, quick manufacture means cheap labour, means, I mean, that's not very sustainable, right? Cheap labour in countries far and wide. It means the obliteration of water supplies in some countries for some people of the world. It's got a lot of, the retail, and this is mainly the clothing side of the business. There's we've talked about it in the lectures, Steve's lecture in particular on sustainability. We've talked about it in the tutorials. We've referred to lots of papers, lots of short articles, just how unsustainable what we're talking about here, fast fashion is. So, on the positive side, just a suggestion, why don't you at least make it explicit that if you're going to recommend quick response manufacturing, at least make the explicit statement that you will try to advise us how and why to do that sort of thing in the most sustainable way, given that we all are aware how unsustainable fast fashion has become. Or you could choose to tone down the rapid manufacturing and actually make a bigger deal about, in the future, we want to be 100% sustainable. We want to rebrand ourselves around an organisation that is known to be and respected to be a more sustainable retail company other than others. That becomes our unique selling point. Different options there, different alternatives. You to decide, but what I would say at the minute where you're pitching in, it's very consulting. You are consultants, but you know what? If we go down, as you're suggesting here, the quick response manufacturing route, it's not going to give us much of a competitive edge compared to our competitors. We're going to be like every other one out there. So, some thought there. And then you gave benefits of it, and I bought some of that. Customer satisfaction, beat competition, that's a little bit in the last conversation. Increased cash flow, not really sure that's our priority right now. But the customer satisfaction, yes, but I'm not entirely convinced. So you need a little bit of detail where you're giving benefits like that and claiming benefits. And again, that approach of best quick response manufacturing is not the only approach we could take here. So have a think about that. When you talked about the 3 A's, that's in our lecture, and that's in, I would tone that down in the way that you presented it in the presentation. Again, your presentation is great, okay? This is about getting it right for the report. But the 3 A's was very specifically what we've presented in our module this term. So I think it is important that you address how accounting, accounts, and accountability are integrated into the strategy, and we think very carefully about how we, use those things and not misuse them. But I think you don't have to call it the 3 A's. You can sort of more subtly introduce those elements into the report. Food and home I've mentioned, don't ignore them, or make it clear and explicit in the report that you're focusing on the clothing, and pitch in there we're more than happy to continue to consult also on other areas of the business. So last point, work on the conclusion of it. I mean, I think you should anyway in the report be ending more with recommendations, a summary of recommendations, because I don't really think your conclusion was actually a conclusion. It didn't convince me anyway that there was. I think you need to be ending with a sort of a summary of recommendations, if you like. But hopefully some comments there that will help in the report. But you don't have a lot of words, as I said. But really great presentation. Well done. Thank you.
Yeah, so my specifics are really just going to reiterate what John's saying, I guess, and say the same things in a different way. But starting at the front and reiterating about, what is the core issue at play here, and it's really that Marks and Spencer's, and I like how John picked up on what I picked up on as well, so you talked about it in purpose, what is Marks and Spencer's purpose? They've kind of lost their way, so what should they be about? So when I was listening to the front end stuff where you're talking about, what had happened in the industry, you're talking about the reasons why, the change in taste, the need for experience, the online fashion, all that type of stuff, I was wanting to know, what does that tell me about Marks and Spencer's? What is it about their problems? So if you include that stuff, it needs to be only in respect of supporting that setting up of the central issue. Agree with John about the, his comments about Jill McDonald and the inappropriate personnel. I would also caution a little bit extra by saying, just because one person turned out not to be the right person, be very careful in generalising that to everyone else. Because actually, Marks and Spencer's staff, the vast majority of them, I'm sure, are fantastic, capable, great people. So, there's a bit of a danger there. Then you went on about increasing overhead costs, which is really a financial issue. And I sort of wrote, but if the sales were there, then this would not be an issue, surely. If you've got the sales, then overheads are fine. So really, what does that again tell us about the issues that Marks and Spencer is facing? Well, their issues aren't an overhead issue. The overhead issues and the financial results are the symptoms of the underlying disease, if you like, which is they've lost their way, they've lost their unique selling point. And it wasn't, same with the supply chain issues, you said it's slow and complicated. Well, that's not necessarily a disadvantage, and I'll come back to talking about why in a minute. But, link it now. When you talked about the retail trends, and I didn't pick up on that point about Deloitte, but John's totally right. You're consultants. You don't want to be saying, hey, these other consultants wrote a really great report. Can you leave now? We've got a phone call to Deloitte to make. So it's a great point.
It's an easy mistake to make.
It's an easy mistake, yeah. But the first thing that you said, the retail trend, sustainability paradigm shift. That's an opportunity, surely. We've lost our USP. You're saying that one of the biggest paradigm shifts is towards sustainability. And the problem at the minute, as John said, is that fast fashion is so unsustainable in many respects, from social sustainability to ecological sustainability to actually, really messing with young people's well-being. I say that with a 13-year-old fashion victim of a daughter at home, and she struggles with it because she knows it's wrong, but she wants to be accepted by her friends. So maybe, when you talked about supply chain issues and you said it's slow and complicated, maybe that's not necessarily the issue. Maybe, maybe the complicated part is, but the slow part, maybe that's not an issue. If we start thinking about the opposite to fast fashion, which is slow fashion. And the example that you can look there is at the company Patagonia, which has turned around and said, we're not like other companies. We're going to sell you one, for example, they always talk about, we're going to sell you one jacket, and that's the only jacket you're going to need for the rest of your life. Because we're going to invest in the quality, and we don't really want you to come back and buy more from us. We're happy just to sell you one. But that type of thinking, and they're doing very, very well. They are really a big player in the market now. But that takes a different mentality. That means that the financial profits don't need to be maximised. They need to be a sufficient reward. So the purpose, the USP, spot on. That paradigm shift could be one opportunity to change what we do. Maybe there's others, as you said. So when it came to the QRM stuff, but actually one point before we come on to the QRM, you talked about the financials there. That was another point where, we are Marks and Spencers, we know those, we got our accountants to write it, we had to sign off on those. So if you want to use them, you've got to tell us something new about those that we didn't already know, to make a point. Then you said the main issue is speed and the need for QRM. I'm sitting there going, well, if we go down the route of wanting to compete with your H&Ms, your Primarks, your Zaras, your Boohoo's, all those types, yes, we'd need to do that. But given what our own image is, are we even if we use QRM, is that going to resolve our image of being dated and stale? So to give you one example, you talked about, where is it? Increased customer satisfaction as a benefit of using QRM. really. So we're going to get the wrong fashion to them more quicker, and that's going to improve their satisfaction. Probably the issue there is the clothes that we're getting to them, not necessarily the speed to which we're getting to them. Yes, speed might become important further down the line, but we need to get that central issue. And again, just like John said, you know, you've got all this spread out through your report. It's now just bringing out and refining the really good stuff that you've got here. So with QRM, I've written down, you know, will this result in more sales? Will it resolve our other issues faced? Will it help us rethink our USP? So maybe have a think about those things first, and then think about how QRM links into it. And I've written down, you know, how all these things that you're talking about, how do they tie back to what the Deloitte report that you presented tells us? Because you said, you know, Deloitte is saying that sustainability is going to be the next big paradigm shift. Maybe we should be focusing on that again. But yeah, and finally, you know, I agree with John. The stuff about the 3 A's, great to see it. Great to see that you're using what you're learning. But for the report, you are the consultants. You probably wouldn't put it that way.
Just on the customer satisfaction point, just to clarify, because I don't want it to be inconsistent when you come and listen back to this. I sort of gave a bit of a praise, a positive side of the customer satisfaction. We're not inconsistent here, because I guess what I was saying was it is important to satisfy your customers, obviously, and it is important to make money. You know, don't get us wrong, the financial values are important. We need, as you say, cash flow target, but also we need going concern. You know, we need to be able to make sure we're a going concern, so we need financial revenues for that and to be able to cover the costs. But it's customer satisfaction at what other externality, at what other cost. So there's you know, there's different ways you can you know, skin the cat is the phrase in terms of customer satisfaction. So just be careful how you pitch that in. I guess, because I'm thinking of the Marks and Spencer's customer, and you know, maybe customer satisfaction in the future, because the Deloitte's, although you're going to tone down that reference, the Deloitte's report is suggesting that it's implying that customers of the future are going to be more satisfied if there is more underlying sustainability policies within the products that you're selling. It's a tough one for Marks and Spencer's, particularly given that their bulk of their demographic, if you like, of their customers is actually probably older generation. Are they quite as concerned about the ecological impacts, the sustainability impacts? I hope they are. My feeling is possibly not, relative to maybe the younger generation. But then again, the younger generation, I'm pretty sure, are the ones, I don't know the figures, but I'm pretty sure they're the ones that are driving the increase in the popularity and the economic successes of the likes of Boohoo and ASOS. So there's contradictions both sides. So I guess a little bit of balance in terms of how you pitch that in. So, to summarise.
Before you summarise,
yes,
just to pitch in there as well. You know, just to reinforce the point that John said, you know, the financials are important and everything. So Patagonia is financially really successful, but what they're not doing is maximising profit at all costs. Their CEO, the founder of it, you know, if it's famous that people that the media that have gone to talk to him and everything, he's basically telling them, I suppose I'm going to talk to you, but we'll talk on my terms. So most of them have to pitch up to his home, which is a humble place in California, and talk to him while he does his gardening. Do you know what I mean? And it's not he doesn't live in one of those Los Angeles sprawling mansions. It's actually a reasonable place. And he turns around and says, you know, what difference would it make if I had 100 more rooms in this house? Which if I had a different type of business I could have, but it meets my needs.
And this is a lovely story, but in terms of your presentation, in terms of your report, you're talking to Marks and Spencer, so that's not going to happen. But you can, in the near future, I would suggest, but what you can do is be bold and make some, you know, kind of strong recommendations for Marks and Spencer's to at least give some thought to being slightly out of the box from its historical trend, its historical the way, and it's getting to the very core of the purpose.
And
What do we see Marks and Spencer's being about in the future?
exactly, and that's the point that my Patagonia story is trying to stress,
Yeah.
is that if you chase the financials, you miss the purpose. But if you focus on the purpose, then probably, if you get the purpose right, the financials will take care of themselves.
Is that all right? Okay, so good luck. You've got a good chance of making a good report as well. You've done great in the presentation, but the report, a little bit of tweaking there, but everybody does. Everybody needs to tweak a little bit. We're not going to tell you what to do. There's no right or wrong, but hopefully we've highlighted some things where you need a bit of consistency, a bit of clarity. But you know, you've got a week to do it. You'll be fine. All right, pressure's off. Well done.
Yeah, go and relax.
Thank you. Excellent.